Okay, hi everybody and welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com and we're here for a session all about Dynamics 365 and lessons for ISVs on the application experience. Our presenter today is Greg Pierce of Concerto Cloud Services. Great to have Greg back with us. And as we get started, I want to let everyone in the audience know we do want to make time for your input and questions, so feel free to use the Q&A block you should see to the right of the main presentation window as we move throughout today's presentation, and I know Greg will be leaving some time. Also be on the lookout for a poll question that we should have later on as well. So without any further delay, Greg, why don't I hand things off to you?
So today we're going to talk a little bit about the recent Delta outage that happened, I think it was about a month ago now. I don't know if any of you that are in the audience actually were affected by it. From a travel perspective, it certainly is a huge pain in the neck. Tanya, if you can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about a few things today related to the outage, and one is the background on it, and it's kind of an oh no, not again thing because I was fortunate enough to get caught up in both the first and the second outage, which was absolutely fantastic. Then we're going to talk through lessons learned from that experience, and look, I think if you stop for a second, a lot of the things that happened in this Delta outage were things that resonate with the customers that we have to work with on a regular basis. And some best practices, I think, make sense from a lessons learned standpoint around what you should put in place and what you should have ready and prepared for when emergencies do come up. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about Dynamics 365 and the different approaches there, and have time for questions and answers at the end of the session. Let me give you a little bit of background on Concerto. We started up back in 2011, and our philosophy from the very beginning has been one of creating a cloud experience for applications that have high service level agreement needs, so approaching 100% uptime requirements, for ones that have what you would consider mode 1 applications, so applications that are critical to your business or are revenue generating, ones that really have a negative impact on your organization if they go down. And tying our compliance and regulatory qualifications and experience to that as well. We started off back in 2011 with a private cloud deployment, and we've had a great success loading customers onto that platform, and now have a multi-cloud approach as well, where we're able to provide to customers not only implementations in private cloud, but hybrid implementations in both private and public cloud. We have a whole range of application security compliances that we meet, and a broad base of customers. We built the platform on some of the best technologies that are available and known to man. I think one of the more fun things that have happened to us recently is just this year, probably about a month ago, we were rated one of the top 5 coolest cloud companies in the world. I don't know if that says anything about our capabilities or how good we are, but it was kind of a fun accolade. So I want to tell you a little bit about, so everybody may not be aware of the Delta outage, so let me give you an idea about what happened. Back in August of last year, there's conflicting information about how it happened, but there was a data center outage that happened for Delta, and it was on a Monday, and that Tuesday morning I was slated to fly out, and since there was some heads up and so forth, I was able to get notification that my flight had been canceled and subsequently booked with another airline. I think I ended up late for wherever it was I was going, but it wasn't a huge impact or inconvenience on me. Not quite the same as it was for some other people. After that event, the Delta CEO came out and said, and I think they were down in that case for about 6 hours. So Delta CEO came out and said, I own this. This isn't okay. It's never going to happen again. And they gave everybody a $200 travel voucher and refunded the price of their ticket, which was, I think, a pretty good customer service type of thing to do. So fast forward to, I think it was early February, mid-February of this year, and all of a sudden I'm in the airport in Minneapolis, and it's a 5:45 flight. Right around 5:30, they're boarding, and they halfway board the airplane. And next thing you know, they stop the boarding process. And an announcement comes over the intercom that says, all Delta flights are grounded because the computer systems are down. Therefore, they can't scan in the tickets to get people on the airplane. And we're just going to have to stand by that. They're going to have an update in 30 minutes. So everybody starts looking at their phone, and they're trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And 30 minutes turns into 2 hours. We're getting the same information from Delta. You can kind of see here. This is an actual picture that I took at the airport, and everybody started looking almost like refugees that were stranded somewhere. They're just kind of laying down and sitting all over the place. And part of the reason for that was that there was no ability for the ticket counter people to actually give vouchers for food or to give vouchers for people to go to a hotel for a period of time, because all of those things were computer dependent. And the information that was presented on Twitter, which is posted on the left-hand side here, was the same thing, almost verbatim, that the desk clerks or the ticket counter people were saying. And also, if you called Delta, they were saying the exact same thing as well, which that's a great consistency of message. Problem was the message is bad because it really didn't give anybody any information. There's an outage, and we're working to fix it, was really all that anybody got. And I think one of the biggest problems here is we all know that you need to learn from your mistakes. And one of the things that resonated most with me was, there's a new CIO with Delta. They're working on fixing their issues. They have a single data center in Atlanta, and right afterwards, the CEO of Delta said, I own this. This is a mistake. It's not going to happen again. So there's a couple things there. One is this. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, especially for a large organization with uptime that is approaching or hovering right around 100%, to have one single data center where maybe a power problem with the state of Georgia could cause an entire worldwide outage of travel and cancel hundreds, if not thousands, of flights. The other is, if you do have a problem, like let's say it's your software package and you have the same sort of experience where things go down and it's 5, 6 hours, whatever it happens to be, and you make the statement that you own it, you really do need to own it going forward. And by own it, that means fix the things that were broken so it doesn't happen again. Crossing your fingers that it doesn't happen again is certainly not going to be a way to ensure that you have the right platform moving forward. So let me start with this. When you think about redundancy, it's not something that's optional these days. It should be table stakes, especially if you're running a big enterprise organization like Delta. But let's just put that aside for a second. Even if you're not running some big enterprise organization, there's too many options out there, including hybrid cloud, to have an excuse about having redundancy. You should be able to fail over from one place to another. You should be able to have systems that can come on and take over in case the primary system goes down. And in order for it to be true redundancy, they have to be in different geographic locations. So that way it can't be that, for example, the first one I think was a power-related item. So power goes down. If you have redundant systems in the same data center, well, that's not really redundant. So there's that part. But I think that it's also important to realize that not only is the redundancy important, but redundancy of function is important. And the ability to take care of customers if your computer systems go down is extraordinarily important. So let me explain what I mean there. So all the systems were down. Delta happens to run also their website off the same system, so their website was down. Their phone system was connected to the computer system, so the dial tree extensions were not working properly for them. People wanted to just rebook on a different flight, and Delta couldn't pull up a system to do that. So if you had separate, disparate systems, like in other words, a different system for booking and a different system for the boarding process, then you'd be able to overcome that. And then finally, just a non-computer related way to handle things, as in have some paper vouchers available for people to be able to get access to a hotel or to food. Not everybody who travels has the extra money to be able to stay in a hotel or pay for that extra night and so forth. Some of them had families, and they stayed overnight in the airport. And it's just these simple little things can make what becomes a huge, impactful, bad experience for people just a little bit better. And if you're going to work to make it better, you have to make sure that it's a meaningful way of making it better. So during this outage, the entire time, the people that are the front line, in the case of a software company, or if you're doing cloud services, you're an IT company, you know who your frontline people are. The people that take the first call from customers. And imagine a scenario where your systems are down. Now imagine that your systems are down and you have customers calling in, and the first person that they're talking to has absolutely no clue what's going on. And that was the case here. The people that were working at the desks, face to face with people that are angry, that are delayed, that had a million different things, vacation, business, whatever it happens to be. They were armed with no information whatsoever or any way to help customers to be able to get over the hump and to be able to get to a point where there at least is some level of satisfaction. We have to arm the people that are the front end of our organizations with much more. They have to be empowered to be able to fix things for your customers. And in the case of Delta, it just wasn't there. So how do you empower people? Well, first off, you have to take a leap of faith that your people are going to do the right thing. And there's a million different little examples of things. I just recently saw a speaker who talked about a friend of his who had bought a car, and the car was probably about two weeks, or I think it was 2 or 3 weeks old. And she was on her way to a very important appointment and got a flat tire. So she called up the dealership, and the dealership said, hey, you know what, no problem. Understand this is a big deal for you. We're going to take care of it. So the dealership shows up with two cars, one person driving one person driving the other. Like, here's a loaner. Take this loaner. We're going to take care of your car. We're going to put on the spare. We'll get it there. We'll get the tire fixed. Good luck on your appointment. And I'm sure you were going to try to stop for some coffee. So here's a cup of coffee for you. Sorry for the inconvenience. So off she goes, gets to her meeting. She's a little bit late for the meeting, but it's fine. Gets through the meeting, and it's an all-day grueling meeting. Calls the dealership, says, hey, I can rush back. I know you guys close at 6, but I should be able to get there in time. He says, you know what, no problem. Just keep the car till tomorrow. We'll bring it to your house tomorrow morning, so you're not inconvenienced any further. So they do. They bring the car to the house the next morning, and he says, here it is, good as new. One problem was that when we washed it inside and out, we hadn't yet dried the floor mats, so they're in the trunk of the car for you. So the long and short of that is, A, that's not a process, I'm sure, that's written anywhere whatsoever for that car dealership. B, they just basically empowered the person to be able to handle a customer satisfaction issue and go above and beyond. And I think C, they created a customer for life. And if we can empower the people on the front end with those sort of things, like in the case of Delta, simply the ability to say, you know what, I just called the Hyatt at the airport, and if you go over there and you say, and you show them your boarding pass from Delta, they're going to give you a room tonight. Little things like that would have made a huge difference. And those are the sort of things that we need to be able to do to empower the people that are on the front end of our organizations to make sure the customer experience is a good one. It has to be customer-centric. It can't always be process and policy-driven, and it can't be that the people on the front end are just telling people within the airport, for example, wait another 30 minutes. As a matter of fact, at one point, I think one of the people, I said, when are you going to find something out? They said, well, it's supposed to be in another 30 minutes. Well, what can I do in the meantime? And I think one of them told me to pray, which prayer and getting on an airplane to me are a little bit scary things. So, there's got to be a better way. So again, I think, if you have a very complex system or even not so complex system, and you need to be able to service customers on a regular basis, it's really a good idea to separate out those separate systems for separate functions. So let's say the case of, let's say you have a business intelligence offering to companies, and it goes down, and the customers are trying to call you up, and your phone system is on the exact same system, so they can't get in touch with you. That's bad. Let's say that the CRM system, which gives the front-end people access to all the information about your customers, are also on the same systems. That's probably pretty bad. And then let's say that the ability for them to communicate with you through email or to go to a website where they have information on tickets are also in the same system. So basically you've gone black on them. It's a pretty bad scenario. You should at least segment out the ability to have information on your customers and to support them from your revenue-generating mission-critical system that provides the product to your customer. I think one thing that to me really resonates is you can't make hollow promises. It always sounds good to say, hey, I own this and it's not going to happen again. But then you have to make sure that the rubber meets the road. And you absolutely need to follow up on those promises. And sometimes that means radical change because there may be a problem that's so big that it just needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed in a very intrusive manner. The other thing I'll tell you is that you better start working on it right away, because one of the worst case scenarios is there's some kind of problem, it's your fault, there's a mea culpa, not going to happen again, we own this, we'll get it fixed, and then it happens again 5 or 6 months later. It just really shows that you didn't take it serious and that it wasn't something that was important enough for you to jump on. So even if you don't jump out with the whole idea of, hey, listen, we own this thing and so forth, it's a little softer than that, and it's more like, hey, here's the problem we have, we need to fix it. You got to follow up, otherwise you're going to lose complete credibility with your customers. Then afterwards, when the fallout happens, you have to make it right. And there's different colloquialisms in the industry. It's like consequence management, incident response. All of these are basically really polite ways of saying, we know bad things are going to happen, and when we do, here's how we're going to respond to them. In the case of the Delta outage, the second outage was longer than the first outage. And in the first outage, they gave a refund on the ticket and a $200 voucher. The second time around, they gave a $200 voucher. So, in other words, they decided that it was too costly, I guess, the first time around, or not as invasive the second time around, or they just got sick of having to write checks back. But it didn't sit well, or it has not sat well with the community of flyers in general, because it's just not a very cool thing to come with a remediation the first time and then change it the second time. So let's apply it to real world. If you're a software provider, an ISV, let's say that you're running in a cloud, you're connected up to, say, Dynamics 365. And you have a 5-hour outage. And for that, you decide to talk to your customers, say 10 of them are affected, and you say, you know what, because of that 10 hours, we're going to give you a credit on your next bill equal to 1 week worth of billing. Customers feel good, they're happy, there you go. Let's say it happens again 5 months later, and you're down for a little bit longer this time, and you go to your customers and tell them, hey, we're going to give you a credit equal to 3 days of your bill. It just doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel like you're a customer-centric organization, and given the chance, people are going to look for other avenues and other types of companies that they could work with as opposed to being loyal to your brand. So here's a little bit more about us. We've worked with Microsoft for a very long time. We've worked on the Dynamic platform. We are heavy users / deployers of both private cloud and Microsoft Azure. We work with GP, SLAX, CRM, Nav. We power the GP and Nav sandboxes for dynamic communities, for those of you who are connected with that group. And we offer a whole range of integration for third-party solutions into Dynamics 365. So if you're an ISV that has a separate database, there's not really a place that's cookie cutter to fall into for Dynamics 365. So we offer we have an offering around that as well. really, one thing that I think is interesting to me is the entire life cycle from a Dynamics 365 thing has come full circle. And we're at a point now where there's multiple deployment options. And you have the ability to deploy either on-premise, you can deploy Dynamics 365 in Azure, and then you can do kind of a mixed mode where portions are in Azure and portions are on-premise as well. Figuring that out can be pretty difficult. We have been working with organizations to determine exactly what that right mix is and consulting with them. A lot of it drives from just, really block and tackle stuff like if you check out Gartner, Gartner has articles on, this is when you should use private cloud and this is when you should use public cloud. And you should use private cloud when you have service level agreements that cover around 100%. If IT is your business, where your revenue generation mechanism is something that's technology based, like a software company. If you have deep security and compliance that traverses not only the software but down into the infrastructure, which is a lot of the time from a compliance perspective, or if it's a mode 1 application where criticality for the organizations that you serve is important, then those are all private cloud deployments, and the system of record has to have just absolute integrity. Beyond that, if those things don't fall into play, if it's not approaching 100%, if it's say 99.5 or 99.9, then public cloud is the deployment method that we prefer in that case. Oftentimes we're looking at hybrid deployments as well. For those of you who missed it, I mentioned real quick there's an on-premise version. There's a private cloud version of Dynamics 365 that's slated to be released this summer. And it will be basically aligned with that Gartner article as far as when you would deploy in private cloud versus in a public cloud scenario. And with that, I think we're at the point where happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, great. So anyone who does have questions, please do use the Q&A that you see here. I also think maybe this would be a time to just bring up the poll question, and this is, I'm going to open it now. It's really just a chance to get some feedback from you for Greg and for the Concerto team. We won't share the results here, and Tanya, if you want to close that on your screen. We'll just leave that open for a little while here. But let me check the question queue. Okay, there's a question here, Greg, about the AWS outage that was reported recently. It just basically asks, what's your take on it?
So the AWS outage happened on Tuesday. It was somewhere around, let's see, it was 10 a.m. reported and 5 p.m. remediated, so about 7 hours, I think. And I think it speaks to the hybrid model. It's not a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket, and I think it ties to this Delta outage as well. If you have both your primary and your redundant system both in AWS, there's a good chance that something like this is going to happen again. If you have production system in private cloud or AWS, but let's say private cloud, and your disaster recovery footprint is in AWS, that gives you that extra degree of mitigation. And there's things you can do from a hybrid perspective where you build out on hybrid cloud where you can get much closer to 4, 5 nines from a redundancy perspective. So again, if it falls into that category of have to be up all the time or close to 100% uptime, and higher performance required, if it's an application that is going to derive your revenue from, then I think you need to look at absolutely a hybrid model in any one of those scenarios. Think about this. Amazon did a study probably 3 or 4 years ago, and what it showed was that if it took more than 2 seconds, or if your page didn't load when a customer came to your site, 47% of them left and never came back. So the amount of customer disruption that happened on Tuesday, given that there were millions of companies that were affected, is just mind-boggling.
There's a question here. When you use the term private cloud, are you talking about on-premise data centers or not?
I'm talking about either. So private cloud could be either a hosted private cloud, which is what we built, or it could be a private cloud that a company has on-premise. They can build their own private cloud. You know, there's been a few companies recently, like Dropbox is a good example, where they pulled their mission-critical stuff out of AWS and they built their own private cloud. That's great for Dropbox because they can build this super high-performance Lamborghini private cloud. But most people, at least in the mid-market or the lower end of enterprise, you know, kind of, because segmentation gets all over the place. Let's call it between, you know, small business up to 2,000 or 3,000 people and a couple billion in revenue. It gets way too expensive to do it. So a lot of those organizations would rather use a hosted private cloud that has a lot of the same characteristics, but the cost is spread over a lot more people.
Okay. Someone's asking, can you just highlight the services that you provide specifically for ISVs, specifically suited for ISVs?
Yeah, so beyond the cloud services, we have a whole range of services for ISVs. Some of it is on the business side, so we help with the financial modeling of how to get to the right price point from a per user perspective if you're going to make the transition to cloud. We help consulting-wise with everything from how to comp the sales reps properly once you switch over to a cloud model to management bonuses. And we also have a DevOps component that we provide to help bridge the gap between what would traditionally be infrastructure and the application.
All right, I want to make a last call for questions here. It looks like we have one more in the queue. This person asks, we're completely on public cloud platform today. What would you say would be the right first step for moving toward a hybrid approach as you suggest?
So, you know, it depends on what kind of experience you have in-house. I think that you know, depending on your size, you may want, you're either looking at a build your own if you're huge. If not, then I would look at a hosted private cloud. And in that case, you need to be able to build out the connectors between the two. And like in our case, we already have those pre-configured and in place. And then you'd want to look at really an analysis breakdown of what makes sense to move to private cloud and what makes sense to leave in public cloud to reach the right equilibrium point of cost and then performance, security, and SLA.
All right, well, I think we are going to end it there. I don't see any other questions at this point. Thank you to everyone in the audience for your attention, for your questions today, and your participation. And Greg, thanks as always for joining us and sharing your views on some of these matters.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, with that, we are going to wrap up for today. Please do look for a quick survey that will pop up after we end today. We definitely appreciate your feedback. It should only take just a few seconds to do. With that, we are going to end today's event. Have a great day, everybody.